Welcome to Racialized 506, a podcast about anti-racism. It's a series of online conversations brought to you by the St. John Newcomers Center. The podcast is intended to underline the challenges of anti-racism and amplify the voices of underrepresented people who experience and confront racism in their daily lives, at school and work, and in our community. By doing this, we hope to encourage positive action and change in the greater St. John area. The hosts for this podcast are Bob Whitney, a retired professor of history and politics from the University of New Brunswick, and Lena Garbia, the Newcomer Settlement Lead at the St. John Newcomers Center.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We recognize and respectfully acknowledge that the St. John Newcomers Center operates on the unceded and unsurrendered homelands of the Wolastoqey, Pasco, Tacoma, and Micmac people. This statement is a symbol of our commitment to implementing the 94 calls to action put forth by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in all operations across our organization. The topic for today is about the anti-Asian racism. Thank you all for joining us today. And I just want to mention and why we chose this episode here and this topic. Many Asian newcomer families experience being victimized in St. John and New Brunswick by racism in the communities they live in. They are treated differently because of their accent, their language skills, the color of their skin, their culture, or because of where they came from. There is a sense of alienation, and that's created as a result of these acts of hatred. Sometimes the issues are overcome, but not as often as people and their families would like. That is why we want to ask our panelists today about some big questions we feel should be answered and talked about. I would love to introduce Bob Whitney, a retired history professor from UNB. We are so happy and proud to have him with us again in our second season as a main person to plan, review, and host the Racialized 506. I will leave it to our host, Bob, to take over.
Thank you, Lena. And good evening, everyone. One of the interesting points was that when we were talking about this particular topic, and we wanted to focus on communities from Asia and newcomers from Asia in St. John and area, was of course the interesting discussion of what we mean by Asia. And of course, Asia is a very big geographical, social, cultural, historical area. When it comes to racism, of course, one of the not so humorous jokes that we came up with, or someone said at one point in these podcasts, is that racists don't discriminate. You know, racists are racist towards everyone. But of course, the groups that racists focus on any given particular time and place have a lot to do with the particular circumstances, history, economic, political contexts of the time. And certainly, as we know in Canada, the history of racism against Asians, wherever Asians happen to come from, has a very long and unfortunate history. Myself, coming from Western Canada, the history of the discrimination against Chinese indentured laborers, mine workers, railway workers, agricultural laborers goes back to the 19th century. And many of the communities and many of the peoples in Western Canada have a very deep understanding of the racism that they've experienced generation over generation. The same is true from people from South Asian communities, especially those who came in the 1960s and 70s. You simply have to read some of the biographical information of the new mayor of Edmonton to read about his story as someone who came to Canada and started to work and became a bus driver and established his life in Edmonton. And I remember those times very well. And I very much remember the discrimination against people of South Asian origin, which was especially intense during the 1970s. So that history is long and unfortunate. And of course, more recently, especially with issues of the pandemic and Donald Trump and referring to the COVID virus as the China virus, et cetera, or once again, some of the issues that emerged in the early 2000s when so many Chinese students were coming to the University of New Brunswick in St. John. And there were, unfortunately, many stories of racism in terms of housing, renting apartments, et cetera, for many of the Chinese students who came during that particular period of time. So that history is both long but very much alive today, and it's something that I think we need to focus on and try to understand the particular dynamics that might have. Part of the purpose of this series was to provide a space for newcomers themselves to voice and to communicate their experiences and their realities as much as possible, because one of the other key aspects of racism is often the silence around it, and that many people, for different reasons, are afraid about talking about it. They don't know how to talk about it. They're concerned that they'll even be more isolated than they already are if they do talk about it. And as we know, New Brunswick, St. John, other places in Canada have reputations of being friendly places in terms of how many people perceive themselves. But often the reality, once again, the day-to-day reality, especially for racialized newcomers, is that our places aren't necessarily as friendly as the perception of the majority often seems to be. One of our earliest broadcasts this year was on the interesting and new actual successful attempts by the Edmonton City Council to put in an anti-racist bylaw. And so there are measures that can be done. Sometimes city governments say, oh, we can't do anything. They pass the buck to the provincial or the federal level, and they say we can't really do anything at the municipal or local level. Edmonton and other places have shown that that's simply not true. Now, getting to our speakers, I'd like to introduce Madhu Verma, who has been a leading social activist for many years. She has been motivated to work on behalf of newcomers because of the racial discrimination she experienced since arriving in Canada from India in 1962. As the chair of Asian Heritage Society in New Brunswick, Verma has worked tirelessly on behalf of minority groups and international students. She has participated in cultural educational workshops with the RCMP and Fredericton Police. She was a Canadian delegate at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in 2001. For her work, there have been many honors, including the New Brunswick Human Rights Award, the Canadian Governor General's Award, and the Queen's Jubilee Medal. So, Madhu.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start first the history point. I came in 1962 to Canada as a young bride. I think I was first imported bride in whole North America. That's what I feel. So 1962, my husband was postdoc in Ottawa, working with one of the Nobel laureates. And then he came to Ottawa, and then I spent few months there, where he was working with other scientists in the physics lab. So after 1963, we came to Fredericton. My husband was offered the job on the phone, looking his credential. He was a top scientist, and UNB wanted to have the physics department to grow and start the PhD program and on their labs and all that. That's why I came. But when I came here, when I went out, I was a very young person. So when I went out, they say, why are you here? This country is not for you, go back. I have no idea how to answer. I say, ask my husband. He is working in the physics lab. Ask him why he brought me here. Anyway, 1970, of course, some more Asian were coming from China, and there were a lot of students in the UNB. So that time they would learn another word. Whenever I went out, they didn't say you go back, but they call me Paki, when are you going back? So luckily I had some background. I learned Indian music, sitar I used to play. At same time, Ravi Shankar came to West to meet with East, bringing to into the art in the West. And then when I played on the stairs, then people came to me. That's where I start conversation with the local community, because conversation is very important. They should know who we are, why we are here. After the, of course, 1970s, Trudeau declared multiculturalism policy, and that's the time we first started into Canadian Association and had a couple of regional conferences. Only my disappointment is that Consul Constantine Passaris, you all know, he was a consul's first president, and we started our work going to the politician, prepare multicultural policy, and Premier Hatfield time, he accepted our multicultural policy, and where the first line was multicultural and intercultural education. And there was a minister provincial minister, who formed the committee where I worked, and many other Asian or other Black community, they work. We made recommendation to the minister, looking at the situation, that how minorities are going to kind of their settlement kind of struggle, or all the getting the job or the housing or all the social things, to make it kind of educational. Besides that, we approached to the education ministers, because what we felt that it's a very important that we should promote multiculturalism in the schools. So the people know we are not here to just take the jobs, but we are here to contribute. When choose the university or the hospital in St. John, we have a friend, they retired now, they were serving the community. So this is the main thing I think we wanted to focus, that in the curriculum also, they should know that Asian and other racial communities, their contribution, they are not taking a job, they are creating a jobs. They are educating the people. So this was our focus that time. And looking at the now situation and that time with all our work, recently what you have mentioned, that Asians, they are kind of victim of the racism, because the virus problem, they think they brought it in Canada. They face a lot of racial harassment. Why is that? Recently, when you must have seen the COVID-19, how many Asian doctors were there? How many they were researchers who were working in the lab up to the late nights? How many workers in the seniors' home? How many workers in the hospitals? How they were serving the community? This is the message has to go from the politicians. Last month, of course, we are just having a Asian Heritage Month, and I came to St. John to see their cultural gala, and we had a gala in Fredericton the next day, and I was so disappointed to see. And St. John, when I came, very few, you can count on the fingers, that very few people came there and to see our cultural program. We work very hard. Same thing happened in Fredericton. We as Asian Heritage Society, we are doing both cultural program and the educational project. We have produced many display about the Asian history, their contributions. Every year we focus on the different group. Only people who are coming, immigrants, new immigrant, or our own people. This is not the way we are going to develop the kind of relationship, understanding each other kind of contribution and make the friends. So what I am feeling that we have to approach to the top levels, provincial and local now. One good thing, I don't know what is happening in St. John and Moncton, but our new mayor first time started to having anti-racism committee, and I am one of them. And we have been approaching to mayor, to the education minister, even to the other minister, to show us your policy of the anti-racism. we didn't get much answer. Just now diversity and inclusion is they're promoting in the workplace, I am working in the police diversity committee. So we even don't know the standard of this training program for our next generation, at least for our children or grandchildren. We pave the way so they are treated equal. So recently, my husband had some disability. In 2 years, we faced that very difficult situation. He has to walk with walker because something he fell or some hit and the brain, he had some blood went into so he was we were facing the disability situation. So I used to take him to the Costco to get the medicine. And one day I went there and he has a hearing aid. Because of his disability, coming into the store, it took 5 minutes more. And when I reached there, where I entered to this hearing aid office, one lady was standing just to pick up her medicine because they created a blocks there. And I stood with my husband, on the walker. And 3 times I said, could you please move? Because she was standing in the right side and the office was on the left side. She was right in the middle, so I could not go into so I said, could you please let us go? She did not move at all. Again, 1 time, 2 times, and I was getting late. So I said, please, could you move little so we can walk in? 3 times, please. And when I just turned myself and came around, she says, well, I heard you, but I want to teach you the manners. I say, what manners? You did not see, excuse me. That's why she didn't let us go. And she doesn't know that my husband was holding the walk. And she says, I was standing here because I want to teach you the lesson. You have to say, excuse me. I am keep saying, please, because I was in a panic. I was getting late and taking care of my husband. And I was really in kind of tears. Recently, I traveled from USA. I coming back on the air hostess is in March. I was there and she came very nicely. What would you like to drink? I said, could you give me some hot drink, please? She says, okay. So she got a tea for me and she said, it's hot. I said, that's okay. It's hot. Then she went to the next person because one of the black boy, very nice to me, he helped me to put my luggage on the top because I couldn't lift. So he was very helpful. She went to him and she says, this lady wants something which I don't understand. Could you help because you were family. So she wants something. So then he came and I am looking. I say, she said, tea is hot. I said, that's okay. She has to go and everybody was looking at me from where this strange person came. And I felt so embarrassed when all the people are looking at me. She says, tea is hot. I said, that's okay. What else I could say? But to looking at my color, looking at me, I don't know what did she have in mind. That's what we are. I have been living here in this country, this is my country now, Canada, from last 60 years. And that's what I am getting when I am outside. So now we have to find the way what to do. This happened just within a month, 2, 4, 5, 6 months.
That is terrible. Like I can even hear the pain in your voice, Madhu. Thank you so much, Madhu, for raising this point. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions and comments later. Yes, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just one brief comment, because I think the point about trying to emphasize and influence the role of politicians and policymakers is obviously very key. But another strategy that can be used at the same time is for different cultural communities to go to the high schools. I mean, I hate to use the term, but high schools are captive audiences. I mean, whether the kids like it or not, they have to be there, or at least most of them try to be there or have to be there. And so if there are more activities in the school from communities that have cultural activities, social activities, musical activities, then hopefully that helps educate a lot of younger people at a very early age about the new realities of their community.
There are red tapes there also.
Yes. Yeah. No,
I know.
that.
Go in the schools. We tried.
Yeah.
They
No.
did not even want us to put the display there in the school for Asian heritage, what research work we do.
Yeah.
There are tapes, I cannot go there.
No, I know. There's a bureaucracy that's there. And so
So what do we do?
we need to find allies. So now, moving on to our next speaker, I would like to introduce Dalia. Was born and grew up in Calcutta, and large a city in eastern India. She first arrived in St. John as a student and completed her MBA at UNB in St. John. An IT project manager by profession, Dalia has had a successful corporate career in New Brunswick over the past several years. She is also a part-time university instructor, teaching a course in management skills and leadership at the MBA program at UNB in St. John, and is recently a mother to a beautiful baby boy. In addition to all these roles, Dalia is ever enthusiastic volunteer for our community. She has led and contributed numerous nonprofit organizations. She is the president of the Project Management Institute New Brunswick chapter, proud board member of the St. John Community Arts Board, the Imperial Theater, Fresh Start Services for Women, Inc., and a volunteer at the Asian Heritage Society of New Brunswick's St. John chapter. She's a dancer, a speaker, a passionate advocate for ethnic and cultural diversity, exchange, and inclusion. And she has spoken and educated for diversity and contributes regularly to programs promoting cross-cultural awareness, sharing, celebration, through which she hopes to enrich her beloved community of St. John. Dalia.
Thanks, Bob, for the introduction. I hope I'm audible. Yes.
You are?
Thank
Perfect.
you. Yes, as you mentioned, Bob, I'm very passionate about this community. It's the place that I've been calling home for over a decade now. Actually, I spent time here as a student at first and got a job, was working here. And then I had moved back to my home city for about 2 years in between, came back here in 2013 and have been living here ever since. Now, I know that we do need new people here, and we have been receiving new people from all over the world, and it is great to see the diversity. Even in the time that I've been here, this place definitely looks and feels more diverse than it has ever been before. And I know we're on the upward graph for that change. More and more people are coming in, will be coming in the next few years. The thing is, though, that we do have a lot less than, say, places like Ontario. And so we have some ways to go when it comes to exposure and the educational component of changing people's mindset. I truly believe that while it's great to have the support of policymakers, while it's great to have bylaws in place to enforce certain measures, I also do feel that at the grassroots level, it has to come from within. For every person, that really these people are no different from us. Like Bob was saying earlier, there's no race, there's no such thing. We're human beings. We all have 2 arms, 2 eyes, 2 legs. We are essentially the same. We just happen to look and talk differently, perhaps behave, eat differently, but at the core of it, we're all human beings wanting the same things for ourselves, for our children. We all want to live here, to grow here. I do want to hold on to the positive side of things, because essentially we in New Brunswick are open. I know there is exceptions and there have been bad experiences for a lot of people, but at the core of it, we here in New Brunswick, we have a spirit of openness and positivity, because racism is taught. We're taught to think that others are different from us. It's not an inherent behavior. I see my son. He's almost 2 years old. He would know no better. If you ask him about his Korean friend in his class, his Black friend in his class, he'd probably tell you the differences between them are just who likes to eat what. Racism in its negative form is taught. And similarly, I feel that inclusion and diversity, equity can also be taught. We can override what has been being taught for differences by educating each other about equity and inclusion. And it has to happen at all levels. I feel, yes, going to high schools is great, but I feel that, we've wasted a few valuable years where we should be tuning them in to look for this and celebrate this diversity from a very, very young age. I'm not going to teach my son that his friend from Korea is any different from him. He's not going to learn that his Black friend is any different from him. They're going to play together, and I feel that this tuning of the mind, this openness of the mind, can be learned from a very young age, and it's on the parents also to educate and to counter any negative influences that may be coming the child's way. In terms of the immigrants' experience in New Brunswick, I do want to say a few words. I know we talk about it a lot here, especially in the context of newcomers. We talk about it a lot because we need more people in this economy. We need more educated people here coming in, contributing to the economy, starting businesses, promoting employment, giving more jobs to other people. That part is great. We know we need that. The question here is also about retention. What is happening to those people a few years down the line? I think we need to take a good hard look at the outward flow, the brain drain that is happening in the direction of Ontario or other parts of Canada, or even the United States for that matter, and really take a look at why are people leaving New Brunswick or choosing to leave after they're settled for a certain number of years in Canada. But there's a lot of focus on entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is great. I come from the area where I have had a corporate career, so I would like to speak in that context. It is great that corporations here are employing more and more newcomers who are from diverse ethnicities, different races, and they love to promote themselves as diverse employers. It is great. We hear from a lot of corporations that we hired 150 immigrants this year, newcomers in our society, and we say, wow, like, you're a very diverse employer, and it's true. It is a very good practice to be inclusive and not discriminate from locals. However, as we move up the corporate ladder, we don't see so many in the top levels of the organization. Essentially, we're not getting the true benefit of the diversity that we have in organizations if at that level we're failing to promote where it is merited. And it really forces people will leave when they don't see their merit being matched by opportunity, the corresponding opportunity, because it is happening elsewhere. It is happening in lots of large global corporations. It's happening in other parts of Canada. People will naturally migrate towards those areas where they will be matched with the opportunity that they deserve. And we don't want that happening. We don't want that brain drain away from New Brunswick. I think that's something that as employers, we really need to be more conscious of and to consciously work against. So it's great to talk about newcomers and help them settle in, and it's great that we expect new people to come in here and help the local economy by creating more jobs, by being entrepreneurs. But what about the people who come here for employment? What are we doing to retain them and help them progress further and further up in their careers and enable their growth here? I think things for us to think of and work on together. And I definitely want to be a part of the solution as well. I'm not here to complain by any means. This is as much on me as it is for any other employer.
Thank you very much, Thalia. And just one quick comment. This reminds me, the comments that were made now and that Varma made earlier were also something that I think is very important in terms of some of our earlier podcasts where we talked about structural racism and systemic racism and how you can have examples of individual racism or attitudes, but then you also have the political and the economic structures and how those can perpetuate discrimination and racism. Okay, let's go on to Ophelia then. Ophelia Maestrado hails from the Philippines, one of the world's largest archipelago nations situated in Southeast Asia and in the Western Pacific Ocean. Ophelia arrived in Canada in June 2009, and she worked as a live-in nanny for about 7 years, and she became a resident and united with her family in 2015. She's a board member of the Filipino Association of New Brunswick since 2010 and became chair of the Filipino Association chapter in 2019. She's a very active member of the Asian Heritage Society in New Brunswick, St. John chapter since 2010. She's currently working at the Great the Canadian Dollar Store head office in Quispam and is a staff accountant and also independent financial advisor for Great Way Financial Inc. Just last December in 2021, she and her family became Canadian citizens, and she's very grateful to call Canada her new home. Ophelia.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
for thanks, Bob. So my name will be pronounced as Ophelia.
Ophelia.
Yes.
Okay, I'm coming at it from a Spanish point of view.
Oh yes, yeah. Okay, but anyway, no worries. I just had to make our
That's
panel
good.
a little lighter. Thank
That's
you.
good.
Hi. Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, I came here as a nanny. So before thinking of coming to Canada, it was kind of like my dream, right? Because knowing that Canada, when I was in the Philippines, I was like, okay, Canada is a nice country to live, which is it is open and then like accepting like diverse culture or like open for everybody. So that's why I tried my best. I don't have any family here in Canada. It was just me. I just thought of coming here and to give my service because during my time it was kind of like you can come over in Canada if you are in a medical profession. So I am not in that road before. So I was in an accounting field. So anyway, I had to start like a nanny there to gain experience in Singapore and Hong Kong. So just to come over. So long story short, I got accepted as a nanny, and I'm so fortunate to have my ever supportive and very kind people, and work with them for 7 years, almost 7 years. So during my time, I was not as really felt like as I wasn't belong in the community because I've seen Filipinos, like I've seen old comers, which are like, they were nurses, they were doctors before. And I believe we had this community that we could also, that's when the Filipino Association is evolved in St. John, because we already have a community within the New Brunswick, the provincial one. So I was being elected, as you mentioned earlier, that I was being the lead for 8 years. So we were thinking that being a Filipino, we need to have a family that we can run into and we can ask for help, or because that's what you need. You were in the we are a stranger in this country, right? So we just have to make way to belong. And then in my time, like I do find ways to interact and then to be, like to be part of anything, so that I could be in a community and I could be in a family as well. So that's why I join in any Filipino, like any cultural or any association that would incorporate all like the Asian heritage. I was in there like since over a decade also. Like I met Madhu. We tried our very hard, like I'm with you, Madhu. We tried our hardest to be acknowledged, and then it is somehow a disappointing feeling that you can only see numbers, like even you can count only non-Asian or like it's just all Asian majority of our audience are. So it's like, what's the purpose of this? Is it just like us? Like, we want it to be out there also, that we will be acknowledged. And because this association is being funded, right? We have money, we have funders that supporting us. We have all the means to have this out there and to be recognized. I would like to share one experience. I mean, and not for me, but for the newcomers that I have been encountered with here in Rasi, or not even just in to be mentioned. They work in a certain establishment, and then they know and they were aware and they've been told that for that specific restaurant, or I may say, were closed during this specific holiday before. But then when for them, they were thinking, oh, we don't have nothing that we would do anyway, so we just have to work. But they were open on that specific day, a holiday, and all of them were Filipino, right? So I was like, my other Canadian friends thought, oh, I saw your friend in there, and they're all Filipinos. And we thought that is closed. Like we were amazed, we were surprised that store is open, and then all Filipinos are all the crew there. They are not being treated as as fair as with same as everybody. Of course, I'm trying to give my help because I have been once a newcomer and I know how they feel. I know I just cannot really say it like in a nice word, but I mean, for myself, I haven't been experiencing such racism myself, but I have friends that have been, and it hurting, like it hurts you. We talk about high school or even in a subject or in a curriculum that kind of like a little bit of the orientation, because I remember in our country, in the Philippines, we have a history subject, and we tackle all country, like all the traditions, all the so we kind of like aware, okay, this is what they're doing. Korean did this, Chinese people does that, and then Indian, and most of and we are aware, and we were not as like what do you call that? Like we don't have any knowledge because it's been taught in our school, right? So we are hoping also that would be implemented here in Canada, and then hopefully here in our city, because even when my children, my kids arrived here, they were small, they were not they were in elementary and high school, and then they did experience a little bullying, like kids been bullied, and because of course they were shy, right? And then they cannot speak that English well in the beginning, so they were timid, and there were but thankfully there are students, or not students, the teachers that will pull them out from the classroom and assisted them, and then eventually they made friends and all that, so they kind of like drive in after a couple, a year or two. So but children they're easy to get along with. They can be like adjusted pretty well, like, right? So and then now I kind of said that they're kind of like, hey, you're all Canadianized now, guys. Like, don't lose being a Filipino. I wanted our being our own roots to be there. Like, number one, be courteous. Be courteous. That's not number one. And then you have to like say like, please and thank you. Like, we don't lose that, and don't forget our language. Like, that's our root. We have to keep that. And then even here in the house, I still encourage to talk our local language. I don't want to lose that with them, right? So yeah, it is somehow that we could I mean, a lot of things that we could do for employment, and then hopefully, like as what Dahlia was saying earlier, is beautiful, like so much depth in there that she's mentioning about that. Hopefully we kind of be there too, like on the top, not just that because we're newcomers, we're immigrants, that we are just in this level, So myself, I am proud to say that even I was just a nanny in the beginning, and I became a staff accountant because I did my best. I did also put hard, my effort, and thank you very much. I hope I'm still in my good timing there, Lina.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And once again, many good points to discuss. Perhaps what struck me most is I love the expression old comer. I think we're all old comers, except for the indigenous peoples of this land. We're all old comers. So maybe the Newcomer Center should reconsider a name change to Old Comer Newcomer Center or something like that, to make sure that the more people we get, the more old comers we get, the better. Far from least, I'd like to introduce Bob Kataiwu. Bob is an independent financial advisor in assets management and insurance planning. His brand is Katai Financial, which was established in 2019. Bob.
Thank you. Thank you for Bob. Robert, my
Yeah,
senior Bob, introduced me.
Yeah, there's two Bobs. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for everyone. Thank you for Lina inviting me to attend. And as always, we know, as the outbreak of COVID-19 has seen an increase in the racist violence towards Asia, and the people of Asia has impacted the health, well-being, and safety of the educators, families, and the community. I think it's timely and necessary to raise the awareness, confront, and push for action to address the issues of discrimination that the Asia community and the people of Asia living in New Brunswick. So for my point of view, I live in Moncton, New Brunswick for the past 3 years, and I moved from Prince Edward Island. I was an international student since 2009, and then started and stayed on Prince Edward Island, and then stayed on Prince Edward Island for 8 years, and then I moved to Moncton. But since 2018, I was went back and forth between New Brunswick and PEI. That's St. John. I have some clients, so at that time, Lena met with me, and we always invite Lena to help us to attend another session. From that event, I can know them better, and then to know what the services I can provide for them. And because since I'm working for the financial advisor, the financial industry, more immigrants from my community from China, they bring certain assets and transfer those assets from China to Canada. So they need the financial advisor or somebody, also the mortgage, because many Chinese family coming to the eastern coast feel, wow, so cheap of the real estate, so cheap of house. Those are the things I do. And from there, I didn't see any discrimination, because as we said, once you grow, once you can bring services to somebody else, once you can bring the benefits to somebody else, they will try to understand you, try to understand your culture, try to understand your point of view. And also at the same time, because as a starter, I all start from scratch. As you know, I'm newcomers. I don't have any families here. My parents are all in home country, but I seem Canada, same St. John, New Brunswick, Moncton, New Brunswick, as my second home. So once I start, I bought the book. That's I need to serve for a lot of English-speaking, we call the seniors or the local people. I feel Canada is a much more multicultural country compared with states, compared with other European countries. So I think we can grow and stay in such a beautiful country. And I believe everybody will have a beautiful future in their own field, own aspect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Bob. That's very eloquent and I think very appropriate to end the speakers on. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was very interesting, and I love it. I know I already have a question, and Rodrigue, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. It's always interesting to listen to newcomers and oldcomers and oddcomers to speak, because sometimes what is new is old. For instance, when the first speaker talked about how she was confronted by people when why are you here and when are you going home? I'm a 13th generation Acadian, and I've had that asked of me, when are you going home? Not recently, but in the 1980s when bilingualism was a very hot topic. It's just to say that some people are ignorant and remain ignorant for a long time. I wanted to mention, it was interesting, sometimes what is difficult when you come to a new country, and even between the Francophones and the Anglophone communities, we have different ways of dealing with issues. And one thing I would suggest, Bob mentioned this earlier, talking about going to the high schools. I would go to all schools, by the way, not just high schools. I think all schools should be approached. The top-down approach is one way and is important to do, but honestly, I think the better way is to find a teacher, find a principal, find a counselor or someone in a school, and make that connection with the school, and then you bring your community to the school through that connection, because all schools or most schools have a multicultural committee of some kind. And so I would strongly suggest to the newcomer community that I'm an educator. I was in education for 30 years. And the way to get into schools is to find that ally within the school and then use it. because that ally will want to use you too. So I mean it in a positive way. I don't mean it in a negative way. I don't usually toot the horn of Anglophone South, but Anglophone South this year has a diversity multicultural coach. Her name is Therese Trofiminkov. Contact her if you are a parent or a member of the community. Well, she can get you connected with schools in the Anglophone South. I also wanted to say, I'm not a member of the city of St. John, but I'm a member like Mohammed of the St. John LIP. And Dahlia, you made the point about retention, which is very important. I know the city of St. John is looking at retention, and we have numbers that are very encouraging. I mean, our population is growing for the first time in a long time. I would argue that possibly we are attracting a lot of Ontarians over here in New Brunswick at this point. Some young families are coming because our Wi-Fi system is as good as the Toronto one, but the houses are cheaper. And so it's one of the reasons why housing prices have gone up in the St. John area. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shadri. Thank you. Mohammed?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say thank you to yourself, Lena, Bob, for co-hosting this season. This has been a wonderful experience for all of us, taking in this very difficult conversations. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge Madhu. Madhu was just announced, there was an announcement, she would be receiving the award on multiculturalism from the Honorable Brenda L. Murphy, who is the Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, on Multiculturalism Day. So we are very, very proud of you, Madhu, and your contributions what you have been doing. However, I have a question for any of the speakers really today, is how do we mitigate or overcome some of the challenges that Asians in particular would facing when it comes to racism? And recently we have seen things like anti-Asian hate in the United States from the pandemic, but also we have seen anti-Asian hate in Canada, in Southern Ontario, where people have been driven over and been killed because of their race. So this is like serious stuff that is happening. Any thoughts, any ideas? But I'll keep it short. Madhu, congratulations. Very proud of your achievements. And this is an honor for the entire province of New Brunswick on your award.
Thank you, Madhu, for everything.
Thank you very much for your comment.
I'd like to take a stab at answering Mohammed's question. It's an important one, and it's one that I think about a lot, as I know everybody here does, because it's such a relevant topic. And really, when I think about hate, except for maybe the mentally imbalanced, psychological cases, which should go to a doctor, but otherwise, for a normally mentally healthy person, if I think about hate, it often stems from uncertainty, from fear, from ignorance. There are reasons behind hate. And I think that if we address those underlying factors, it often starts with ignorance, and then it slowly develops into maybe fear. Like, I don't know, that other person looks so different, and it might look scary, or what are they gonna do? Are they gonna come steal our jobs? It comes from a place of uncertainty and insecurity, and fear, and sometimes. And I feel that we can address those could be addressed in a very positive way. Like, in my head, it's very simple. There's only one way to reply to hate. There's only one way to attack hate, and that is with love. An outpour of love and acceptance and kindness and celebration. It is to open the doors to have more conversations that take away some of that uncertainty and that ignorance. You don't keep silent, my door is open, ask me. Really learn about this, and that will take away some of my ignorance, some of my uncertainty. And next thing you know, I don't see you as so different anymore. And then as a next step, I don't hate you really anymore, because I see that, at the essence of it, you're not that different from who I am. So I think there's really one way to reply with hate.
Thank you, Dahlia. I think this was very, it's very informative because I think we need to spread love, but as Madhu said, we need those openings in our community for where we can spread love. So I loved your thought process there.
It looks like we're running over time, but there is one question, and it was sent to me in the chat in my private. It is open for anybody. It says lots of Asians worked at the health sector, especially during COVID. Maybe there is supposed to be a special recognition from officials. This question for anyone: do you see the racism issues are getting better or worse from 30 years ago in New Brunswick?
I'd like to say absolutely they need to be recognized because this really creates a sense of diversity, inclusion, and equity. But I also feel it's a just thing. But on the 30-year racism mark, I feel we haven't moved the needle at all. If we have moved it in another direction, unfortunately. That's my sense, but I may be wrong. But from the reason why I feel this way is we are still dealing with the same issues that we were dealing 60 years ago when Madhu came. We're still dealing with, back then they were overt, now they are covert, and they're systemic. So they are now bungled into things that we have agreed to accept. And education, love is the way to go.
I could never have imagined this series on anti-racism conversation 10 or 20 years ago. And when it came to St. John, people said, oh no, that kind of thing doesn't happen here. Well, it's happening. It might be small, but I think it's significant. So I think that in that sense, there's a big fight. So I don't disagree with Mohammed, but there's that. And then just the other thing that I saw the other day, because I happen to live close to a daycare where there are little kids who are Arabic and Chinese and Filipino, and watching those little kids walk down the street together, laughing and playing together and sorting out how to communicate with each other, even though they're not speaking the same language, reminded me of my life in Montreal, reminded me of my life in Toronto. And those kids are going to grow up being with other kids from different places. And so that just put a smile on my face to see kids in Uptown St. John doing that. I didn't see that 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
I think the message has to go. Conversation is very important. Integration. Integration is a very, very important. We should not be living in isolation. There also were whosoever is serving the new immigrant, this message has to go. Try to make new friends. This is very important. Your children should also try to make the friends in the school. So this makes a lot of difference. We cannot live in the isolation because of our culture. We have to try. Of course, it has to come from the both sides. This is very important. And the local people also, maybe in the church or other organization where they all get together, this message has to go that they are here to contribute. So we also have to kind of be friend to each other. It's not only some I see within my own community too. We used to come and we make an effort to get connected with the local community because maybe my husband was in the university. I started going to the faculty wives club. I was only two of us was the visible minority. Rest were all local. In the beginning, they didn't talk to us, but we made some effort. I took some craft from the house and showed them. So this is what I mean, that we also, new immigrants, have to make an effort at the workplace, wherever they could meet other people.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you so much, Madhu. Thank you so much, everyone. That was very interesting conversation and discussion. And
Can I just say one thing, Madhu?
Yes, please.
We've been in New Brunswick for the same amount of time. I was born in 1962.
I like that. Thanks, Rodrigue. Thank you so much, everyone. And there is a lot to take from the conversation and think about. And if anyone has any questions or suggestions, please send them. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Have a good day.